A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus presented another parable to those gathered. The kingdom of heaven is like a farmer who sowed good seed in a field. While everyone was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and then made off. When the crop began to mature and yield grain, the weeds became evident as well. The farmer's workers came and asked, "Did you not sow good seed in your field? Where are the weeds coming from?" The farmer replied, "I see an enemy's hand in this." They in turn asked, "Do you want us to go out and pull them up?" "No," replied the farmer. "If you pull up the weeds, you might take the wheat along with them. Let them grow together until the harvest. Then at harvest time, I will order the harvesters to first collect the weeds and bundle them up to burn, then to gather the wheat into my barn." Jesus presented another parable to the crowds. The kingdom of heaven is like the mustard seed that a farmer sowed in a field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the biggest shrub of all. It becomes a tree so that the birds of the air come to perch in its branches. Jesus offered them yet another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like the yeast a baker took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until it was leavened all the way through. Jesus spoke all of these things to the crowd in parables. He spoke to them in parables only to fulfill what had been said through the prophet. "I will open my mouth in parables. I will announce things hidden since the creation of the world." Then Jesus left the crowd and went into the house, and there the disciples came in and said, "Teacher, explain the parable of the weeds in the field." Jesus answered, "The farmer sowing the good seed is the chosen one. The field is the world, and the good seed, the citizens of the kingdom. The weeds are the followers of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, while the harvesters are the angels. Just as weeds are collected and burned, so it will be at the end of the age. The chosen one will send the angels who will weed out the kingdom of everything that causes sin and all who act lawlessly. The angels will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." But those who are just will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Abba God. Let those of you who have ears to hear this. the good news of salvation. Good evening. Tonight, we as a Dignity community are celebrating the feast of Mary of Magdala. The trouble is, very little has been handed down to us about Mary of Magdala. In the Gospel of Mark, Mark tells us that she is from the fishing village of Magdala, that Jesus cast out 7 demons, and that she made the choice to follow him. In the Gospel of the John, she is supposed to see the risen Christ. That's it. There are 3 false myths about Mary of Magdalene that we need to debunk. First, that she was rich. Second, that she was sexually promiscuous. Third, that she was Jesus' lover or wife. First, let's debunk the wealth myth. At the end of Mark's Gospel, Mary procured expensive embalming spices for the body of the crucified Jesus. Does this spending spree imply Mary was a wealthy woman? Or is it simply a measure of her devotion to Jesus that she spent everything she had, or persuaded someone else to make the donation? We don't know. And Mark, of course, is frustratingly laconic in his description. So there really isn't enough to go on to claim that she's wealthy. Second, let's debunk the promiscuous myth. In 521 AD, yes, we are going there, 521 AD, Pope Gregory the Great declared that Mary of Magdala was the unnamed sinful woman who anoints Jesus in Mark, Matthew, and Luke. Inconveniently for Pope Gregory, in John chapter 12, the 4th evangelist names this anointing woman as Mary of Bethany. So it's actually a bit of a stretch. But this image of Mary as the sinful woman became a fixture of the Christian imagination, and there are some stunning paintings of Mary Magdalene as a penitent woman. In 1969, the Catholic Church officially recognized what Protestant theologians have been saying for several centuries, and clarified that with all due respect to Gregory the Great, no, Mary of Magdala was not the penitent woman who anointed Jesus. Third, let's debunk the marriage myth. In 2003, the Da Vinci Code became a cultural phenomenon, popularizing the esoteric Gnostic narrative that Mary of Magdala was the secret lover and wife of Jesus, and bore his children in secret. Now, of course, an illicit romance between Jesus and Mary is a page turner and a high-grossing Hollywood movie, but it's not in any of the canonical Gospels, which are canonical because they were written by the earliest followers of Jesus who were closest to him. In fact, in the Gospel of John, during the Last Supper, it is a male disciple that Jesus is homoerotically cuddling with. In ancient times, you would share a reclining chair with your lover at an ancient feast. And John is referring to this tradition. As many of you know, this chap is referred to as the disciple whom Jesus loves. he takes on the duty of looking after Mary after Jesus dies. That's Mary, mother of Jesus. And this beloved disciples was one of the main eyewitness sources that John used to write his fourth gospel. Ironically, there are many theologians who want to take everything in the Bible literally except the beloved disciple, where Jesus had a male favorite. Suddenly, that one little character is a fiction that John must have put in. So, if we are going to have a somewhat sacrilegious and salacious conversation about who Jesus's lover might have been, I hate to break it to you, but an honest assessment of the gospel texts does not lead to Mary Magdalene. It leads straight to the beloved male disciple. And no, I am not projecting anything onto the Gospel of John, my friends. The Greek is unambiguously homoerotic in how it refers to Jesus and the beloved disciple. But the English, with all due respect to the King James Bible, is not. There is a long, misleading tradition, which makes me personally furious, of translating every passage involving the beloved disciple in odd ways that neuter all of the ironic connotations of the Greek. All of this speculation about Jesus and Mary Magdalene as a couple, it creates a kind of smokescreen, which prevents many people from seeing the actual erotic relationship between Jesus and another man in the gospel. And it's in the Greek. This is not a projection. But perhaps that's what the powers that be secretly want. But let's get back to Mary. With all these myths debunked, with the real Mary Magdalene, please stand up. Let's start with the name. Magdala was a humble village on the inland lake. So the Sea of Galilee is an inland lake. And Mary grew up there in that poor little fishing village. Mary was not content to live out her days as a subservient wife, cooking, cleaning, and keeping up the house for a husband who effectively owned her in a kind of master-slave relationship. Mary was inspired to leave behind her family and friends in Magdala and follow Jesus. Now, what that meant in practice was listening a lot to Jesus' preaching. Now, at times, the passion narrative can dominate our mental image of Jesus Christ. But equally important, but much more difficult to understand, are these parables that Jesus became famous for speaking to the salt of the earth people of ancient Israel. Mary of Magdala would have certainly played a part in finding a large open space for people to sit down, and she would join in with the crowd to listen to Jesus's famous talks. She probably heard some of these parables over and over and over again, like polished jewels, just like some of us have heard the parable of the weeds over and over and over again. The people of ancient Israel, many of them were farmers, and Jesus often tried to reach them with agricultural metaphors. Jesus wasn't the first to do this. It was a common trope in a genre known as wisdom literature, and that includes the Book of Wisdom from which we read tonight. Coming from this humble fishing village, Mary could follow all of Jesus' parables, which are recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. Mary knew about the nuisance of weeds in a field. You will notice that I wore a shirt with weeds. And she knew that weeds could drain the soil of nutrients that crops needed. But Mary also knew that if you pull weeds out, the roots of the weeds, they interlock with the roots of the crops. And so there's actually quite a bit of risk in removing the weeds. So what does Jesus mean by let the weeds be? What is Jesus trying to say here? Mary of Magdala probably pondered a bit. It is inevitable that things are not always going to be perfect. And we are called to accept the weeds, the imperfections, the vicissitudes, the trials. Mary knew that mustard seeds began small, but could grow into massively tall shrubs. It probably inspired her to think more about how little choices as little as a mustard seed, little choices between virtue or vice can quickly grow. And Mary of Magdala knew how to make bread. And she knew how remarkable yeast was. Okay, so I want to go a little bit longer tonight because I want to explain this. Our modern relationship with bread completely gets in the way of understanding the parable about yeast and bread that we read in the gospel tonight. In the ancient world, it was hard work to make bread. They didn't have all the fancy gizmos that we have. But Mary of Magdala knew that if she did the right thing and the correct thing in the kitchen, even though it was hard work, once she left it, she knew that it would rise. And this is a parable about doing the work and then having the faith that it's going to rise. It's hard for us to access because we just buy bread at the store. With this yeast metaphor, Jesus is trying to find a creative way to allegorize the power of just doing the hard work and letting go, trusting that the yeast will soon work its own magic. The last part of this gospel passage is the hardest to talk about. It brings us to evil. Mary knew there was evil in the world. For God's sake, she lived under the tyranny of the Roman Empire. With all due respect to the Italians in the church, the Romans were no joke. One irony known to the Christians who first heard this gospel, but lost often on us. Mary was one of the last people from Magdala. That entire fishing village was razed during the Jewish-Roman War of the 60s and 70s. I'm not talking about the 1960s and 70s. I'm talking about the original 60s and 70s. We don't know if Mary lived long enough to see her city brought down, but her name in the Gospels, as they were written, probably in the first century, carried that Roman atrocity. In Judaism, it was customary to personify the force of sin as the devil or the accuser. who tests our resolve when we set out to make righteous choices. Horror films have created another kind of smokescreen, and the image of the devil from Hollywood actually can get in the way of us trying to understand what Jesus said in the gospel tonight. This is really important. No one gets away with doing the wrong things. No one. The Last Judgment, as dramatic as the gnashing of teeth and the fiery furnace and all of those really outlandish images can be, the Last Judgment boils down to this: foolish choices catch up. Jesus wanted Mary and all of his followers to have hope, because God is there to support us when we choose to do the right thing. And in the book of wisdom from which we read tonight, that entire book is about choosing between whether we're going to be wise or foolish. We got to be honest. Our Christian faith is a hard faith. And there are going to be moments where we are called to deal with the weeds in the field, or to flex our elbow grease to make some bread. As we think about our week ahead, we face a series of choices at work as well as in our personal lives. And to quote St. Paul, are we willing to groan as we do the right thing? Or are we going to cave in and act foolishly? Let us all pray for the strength to be wise and to listen to Jesus like Mary. Amen.